Good morning, everybody. Thanks for taking the time out to share some time this morning to learn more about our checklist for back to school and network planning. This is Rich Nedwich. I'm Director of Education here at RUCKUS. Sitting across from me is Rick Friedman.
Good morning, good afternoon. Rick Friedman. I'm the Director of Product Marketing for our switching products.
And we're here in California and out on the East Coast. Our friend JP. JP, you want to say hi? Unmute yourself, JP, and then say hi.
Yeah. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody.
Hey, welcome. All right, so today we have a bunch of things to cover. I think we'll have time to cover everything well and time for your questions. Feel free, as we go over it, to use the Q&A panel on the right side of the WebEx interface and let us know your questions or something you want us to double click on. We're happy to do that. We're going to go over what we call the 5 phases of digital learning transition and the technologies that underpin them, and then try to explain how we see those tying into what your schools are trying to accomplish. There are many implications for this, things that we hope you won't overlook, and we'll present them as a checklist to help you better plan this digital transition. And of course, we'll let you know what products are available to help you fill in those checklist items. And then there'll be some things to help you follow up after this webinar. So let's just jump right in. So there's been this research note out there for a few years, and I believe that we're still sort of paused on this. A few years ago, we heard that within 3 years, more than 50% of curriculum will be digital. And I still think this is mostly true. And I laugh, but the reality is we hear from so many schools about the challenges they have in going digital, meaning something as simple as, can I support BYOD? Can I support one-to-one Chromebooks in my middle school math class, et cetera? And yet, today, most schools would say they're about 10 to 15% digital curriculum. And yet, there's challenges with supporting even these basic models I'm talking about. If you need to deliver video to 30 devices at the same time in a classroom, could you do it today on your existing infrastructure? And if not, where's the bottleneck? Is it, is it the Wi-Fi? Is it the device? Is it the switch? Who knows? But there's already lots of challenges with going down this road, let alone when the curriculum's 50% or more digital, when there's going to be that much more dependency on making the networks work to get through a digital lesson plan more pervasively in a school or across a district. So I still believe this is true. And yet I want to make clear, there's already challenges today, I'm sure you're well aware of, that we're all addressing. It's only going to get more challenging over time, which is why it's so important to plan ahead and align IT and curriculum needs. And that's really what we want to talk about. So what does it look like? Well, we did this survey recently, and I'm going to touch on that in a little bit also. Here's an example with virtual reality, right? So if you've been at any of the educational technology conferences over the last few years, you probably saw lots of booths showing off different headsets, et cetera. Here's Oculus. Or maybe in your classroom, you're already trying it. So according to this research, 41% of schools, larger schools, over 15,000 students, are already using VR as a learning tool today. Now, that could be anything from one classroom with one headset to multiple classrooms. Everybody's got one. But in general, larger districts have the resources to purchase and train and deploy VR today. But what's interesting is the largest group coming is sort of the small to mid-sized schools. So 1,000 to 5,000 students plan to, those schools and districts plan to use VR in the next year. So it's definitely something that's becoming a little bit more mainstream. It could be for accessibility, it could be for STEM learning, it could be for virtual field trips, you name it, right? But it's more demand on the network for higher bandwidth, low latency applications, right? You don't want to jar someone out of their VR experience because of a bad network connection. Another trend that we're seeing, and maybe you're seeing in your school as well, is eSports, right? Whether they're the new athletics or not, I guess, is debatable. I kind of chuckled when I saw that. But what's not funny, what's serious, is that this is now over a $1 billion industry. And we're seeing significant uptake in eSport interest in schools. It's not huge numbers today, but it's growing fast, and not just in primary education, but now into college and university. So there is that pathway that if your school is encouraging esports and enabling it, that those students may be able to go on to continue esports into college and university, and it's becoming big business. I don't know if you guys saw the recent headlines of the Fortnite competition where the winner got $3 million. Now you tell your kids don't play video games, and they're going to say, but I could be rich. So this is of interest, right? And it's of interest for a number of reasons. If you look at the pictures here, you'll see women on the display here. This is about inclusivity as well. You don't have to be a high school quarterback jock, and you don't have to be a guy. It's anyone can play video games, right? And so it's much more inclusive, so more people can learn skills like collaboration, social skills, coding, design. There's a lot of areas of interest here.
Yeah, it's quite a interesting area. I know for myself, and you can tell by my gray hair, I'm kind of old school, that this is a little bit unique for me. But it's very interesting to see the growth of it. Your comment about the kind of money that's being spent on it to expand this, and in high schools as well as colleges, this is becoming real. I don't know what what the audience sees of this. It's still on the cutting edge to me, but we're certainly seeing a lot of uptick on it in particular areas. So.
Yeah. Hey, if you guys are seeing esports in your school, I'd be curious if you just want to raise your hand in the Q&A and just say, we're doing esports. I'd be curious. That would be great. All right, so let's talk about, again, how all this fits into the broader context of this transition to digital learning. And what do we mean by that? And what you're seeing here, an infographic that was put together with help from the Learning Council, which is a market research firm, think tank, media agency, if you will, that works with lots of school districts, about 100,000 subscribers to their newsletters. And together we came up with this idea, the 5 phases of digital learning. And most recently we conducted a survey with Center for Digital Education, or CDE, which kind of revalidated some of these assumptions. And I'll tell you what the outcome was. But first, what do these different colorful chevrons mean? Well, we start with lab-centric digital learning. This is the idea of a few maybe desktops at the edge of a classroom. When I grew up, aging myself, right, a few colorful bubble iMacs on the edge of the classroom where kids would fight over it and say, I want to play with the computer, right? Because it's a lot more interesting than sitting there looking at your textbook or working on a worksheet, right? It's a very engaging thing. Well, today, computer labs could be 3D printing stations, it could be coding stations, could be a VR station. So, but that's how it's deployed that way. Now, there's not many who only do that. As you can see, only 1% of our survey said they only have a lab environment. But that's what's going on there. And by phase 2, it's more of a classroom digital learning environment, but it's the teacher that's really digital, right? So the teacher has the laptop, they're the sage on the stage, if you will, presenting to a group of students who may just have textbooks or worksheets out, or they may have, maybe in some classes, laptops or shared laptops. But the teacher's in the front and the grid array of students facing them. 26% say they're currently in phase 2, right? And we're starting to move digital here with some online things, Google Docs, interactive ebooks, et cetera. By phase 3, it's more student-centric learning. So what do we mean by that? It's designing the learning around the needs and location of the student. So within the classroom or within the school district, that's collaborative work groups. So now maybe it's a couple of desks grouped together with a large screen display that the kids share. I want to share my screen. No, let me share my screen, and let's work together on this file and do it together. And now the teacher's more of the guide on the side, if you will, and moving from station to station. And so the learning is happening within the students, and they're learning collaboration, communication, creativity, et cetera. Enabling that is a step forward from a technology perspective. You need flexible workspaces enabled through mobility, which is probably Wi-Fi in most cases. Outside the classroom, now we want students to also still engage with digital learning content, so they need to be able to learn from home or a library or a hotspot, et cetera. So outside connectivity, as you see in the image above here, becomes important. Now, when we first did this poll, late 2016, the majority of schools said they were between phase 2 and 3. When we ran the survey this year, 58% said they see themselves in phase 3. So we definitely see the progression forward along this path. And if you read the detail here by phase 4, which I'm going to get to, you see 40% of schools say they desire to get to phase 4 over the next year and a half. So we're definitely seeing that there is a progression over the last few years and an interest in moving forward over the next 2 years. So we do see this learning transition is actually happening. And by community, we're talking about a number of different things. So can we get subject matter experts from the community into the classroom? It may not be always practical to physically have someone come in, but virtually you could. It could be a 10-minute session talking to a nurse in a hospital, or a firefighter, or a politician, or someone who can speak to a class. And so subject matter expert involvement and community involvement can happen using video collaboration. In this phase, we definitely see more video than before. Video for those types of applications, video for remote learning, so lecture capture and remote learning or distance learning, as well as we start seeing more and more video like surveillance or CCTV cameras being put on IP networks, so they're easier to manage. So much more video as we get to phase 4 and 5. We also see, while VR started in phase 3, it's going to get more mainstream in phase 4. While we had gamification of content in phase 3, we're going into more eSports by phase 4. And again, eSports ties into this idea of inclusivity and community, because now you've got teams competing against teams, school versus school, either physically or virtually, because you can do online gaming events as well. By phase 5, we've really broken down all barriers at this point. So you have more of like the higher ed MOOC model or massive open online courses. And so now a teacher could have kids participating in the class from multiple schools, multiple cities, internationally, you name it, as long as they have a connection. So that's the idea of progressing from student-centric learning to community learning to even global or breaking down barriers as we progress through all these phases. You guys have any comments you want to throw in, Rick or JP, on this?
Well, we'll talk a little bit more as we go through the webinar. Of course, you know, a lot of this is, Rich, you talked a lot about the capabilities, and obviously, of course, our focus here is saying, hey, as you get to more and more sophisticated stuff, you need technology to help you get there. So you need higher performance, you need lower latency, you need, you know, we'll talk a little bit more, I'm sure, talk about, you know, the reliability of the network is critical if you know, dependence on the network. So that goes hand in hand, obviously, to support those requirements.
So why don't we, at this point, ask our audience, so now that you've looked at those phases, you can think, where are you on the phase of digital learning transition? I mentioned where most schools self-identify, but do you see your school still as lab-centric in phase 1, trying to move to phase 2? Do you see yourselves as moving from teacher to student-centric, where you're going from sage on the stage to guide on the side type approach? Or are you truly going out community-centric, getting more video collaboration, engaging industry experts and other classrooms to collaborate with each other? Or are you looking to even go beyond that and engage cross-border and open things up and offer online courses? Or if you're not sure, just let us know you're not sure.
Yeah, and if you haven't noticed, there should be a panel on the right that pops up with a poll. So if you can click a button and then hit the submit button, we'll get a response. And you know, it'll be interesting to see what you folks are. I think that most of the people we've been talking to, say in the last year, are building an infrastructure that fit in those phase 3, phase 4 area. I mean, there are a few outliers, but that's probably the majority of what we're seeing in talking to customers about what they've been building their networks to support over the last year or so.
All right. So hopefully everyone's had a chance to go ahead and submit their answers, and we can close out the poll. Some help from Amy to close out the poll. So, all right, so what we're seeing now, wow, we have some progressive schools on the line. Okay. I see some that are right where we expect, So,
I think that's probably pretty consistent with what we see.
Right, about a third going from phase 2 to 3. And then, but a significant number of you are saying you're going from phase 3 to 4, and that's very cool. And that does represent our recent survey, which says that, 40% are trying to get to phase 4. If you have a specific use case that resonated from what we talked about that says we're going to phase 4 because we're going to do eSports or video collaboration or something, if you could just drop a note in the Q&A or in the chat, that would be great to help us understand where you see yourself and what's driving that transition. All right, so thank you for that. Now, the other part of that infographic that I was showing at the bottom was the infrastructure needed to support it, the different technologies. And I, this is really about you all, so I don't want to spend too much time in the beginning on that, but now I want to bring it back to that because it's important that as on the academic side, we say, here's where we want to get to improve student outcomes and to, impart 21st century teaching and learning skills. There is some basic blocking and tackling and then some not so basic things to think about to support that. So we'll talk about the different technologies here, and I'll kick off with wireless and then I'll pass the torch. So wireless technologies to scale, and now I don't know where you're all at as far as your technical expertise, so I apologize if some of this is pretty basic, but there's a lot of acronyms. You may have heard 802.11ac or AX. It's now appropriately called Wi-Fi 5 and 6. So Wi-Fi 6 is the latest Wi-Fi standard. It is really driven or imparted to create higher capacity connections, more connected devices at the same time while preserving or maybe even improving throughput. So why is that important? Because there's more devices connected to the Wi-Fi network than ever before. As you transition to digital learning and you've got every student and the teacher connected on some sort of tablet or phone or laptop, then you have higher capacity needs. But if it's things connected, whether it's IoT things or physical devices, teaching and learning devices like a smartboard or a printer or a phone, et cetera. So other things can be connected on Wi-Fi as well. AC, which you may have now, Wi-Fi 5, was originally developed for improved throughput. So high bandwidth applications like video need Wi-Fi 5, but you can only get so many devices on the network at once, right? So Wi-Fi 5 is awesome. It provides tremendous throughput, probably fine for the next several years, but AX takes it to another level by giving you that throughput and higher number of connections to support other devices, like IoT. So IoT devices in the classroom could be things like locks, clocks, the charm or alarm system in your school. It could be the HVAC, so heating and cooling systems. Any number of things can be connected onto the network, plus learning IoT devices, robots, measurements that you're doing for gardening and things of that nature. I've seen all kinds of applications like that. If you've got fish in an aquarium and you want to measure salinity, all kinds of stuff can be done through IoT. In-building LTE, we're seeing an emergent need for this. It could be 5G at some point or something between now and 5G being available to give in-building LTE for emergency communications, right? So if something happens, can you get along? Can you get a dial tone? Can you make a phone call within the building to talk to, your SRO, if you have a police officer present or your principal, can they talk to each other? Or with all this video that's coming on the network, is there another way to backhaul that video so it's not all on the Wi-Fi? So in-building LTE is becoming emergently interesting as well. All right, let me just skip through this so we don't spend too much time on it. Network controllers is something you need to think about. So when you put in wireless access points, you have the option of putting in an on-prem device to manage them. We call it a controller. That controller can manage Wi-Fi only, or a network controller rather than a wireless controller can also manage your switches as well as your Wi-Fi. You need to consider whether you want a controller at all. You could run standalone, where the controller code is distributed among the access points and there is no physical box, or you can have it in the cloud, where the management is actually in somebody else's data center and they're just managing your infrastructure at your school site. That's another very popular way to go these days. In general, you want to reduce the number of management touch points. So if you can centralize it across the district or make it mobile or maybe have a partner manage it for you, these are all options to consider in order for you to scale up and go from phase to phase so that you're not bogged down with the day-to-day management of so much equipment. All right. With that, I'm going to pass it over. Rick, you want to talk about switching?
Oh, I love to talk about switching. Yeah, I know that, everything is, everything, excuse me, everything is going wireless, and we see a lot of it. But the reality is there's still a lot of devices that are connected with a wire, as well as the fact that all those access points go into a switch someplace, in the network. And as you mentioned, the number of devices that are being used, is going up. The importance of that and being able to do something effectively in a classroom means you need reliable, high-performance infrastructure to work. We are seeing, more and more applications going to cloud. A lot of Google apps, but everything means access to the cloud, cloud-based apps, which also means, you need low latency, and things in the classroom are just dependent on having a good, high-performance, reliable connection to the internet. So, if that doesn't work for you, then the teacher's kind of stuck, and that's an important thing. So, we like to look at a lot of things about scaling. We can build, and I would say all our competitors too, can build a network, for at a point in time. But you need to think about how this is going to build and grow, because, we typically see a Wi-Fi, the life of APs is typically in the 3 to 5 year range. But the switching, a lot of the schools we're talking to, they want stuff that's going to last 7 to 10 years. So you need to look at things that say not only do they meet what I need today, but how do I grow? So it's things like looking at a scalable design and using things like, we've progressed in technology to the power of what you can put into a switch today, a stackable switch, as opposed to a chassis, and designing things to be able to grow and expand as opposed to what, I tend to refer to as a rip and replace. It's like, okay, it's good, and I've exceeded what I need, I got to throw it away and buy a new one. We're really trying to design things to be able to let you, build and grow and expand. You mentioned on the Wi-Fi about flexible deployments. We're mirroring that on the switch side too. The fact that you can repurpose, the same physical switches with different architectures and different control platforms without having to swap out the hardware. And again, reducing the number of touch points, certainly stacking, to a very large scale, and our campus fabric technology let you expand that even more. And, really integrating the wired platform with the wireless. So it's, we've been moving over the last year or so very rapidly to be able to use the same management, the same controllers. Run your wireless controller can now manage your switches as well. So to really simplify the management platform, but also doing things in a very consistent way that give you, not only management, but security and policy management across your infrastructure, whether those users and devices are connected or over a wire or wirelessly. Mm-hmm. And then it's the complementary technologies. As you said, network's all about, the weakest link. Having a great Wi-Fi 6 AP and an old crummy network, it doesn't do you any good. So you also need to think about some things like, power over Ethernet technologies. It's been around for a really long time, but we're advancing beyond, pretty much everybody supports PoE and PoE plus standards for 30 minutes, but expanding now to 90 watts. And then we could probably talk for a long time about multi-gigabit, but also we're seeing a lot of advancement in the need for, performance beyond 1 gig connections at the port.
Yeah, especially for access points that are now connected with
multi-gigabit ports, right. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Now, all of that needs to get connected together at a very fundamental layer. So, JP, you want to tell us a little bit more about the cabling technologies to scale?
Yeah, absolutely, and I appreciate it. Happy Thursday, everybody. As I'd mentioned earlier, my name's JP Doherty, and I'm a sales director for CommScope's Enterprise Division, and I based out of North Carolina. I know we have a varying degree of knowledge levels on this call, so I don't want to overstate or understate anything, but I thought a quick recap of, really what makes up a structured cabling system. It's all the cables and wires that are associated equipment and apparatus that, are necessary to provide service from the network interface to the information outlet at the work location, or obviously to any communication device, within the customer's, premise. We talk about, some key components that you really need to consider when looking at your structured cabling options. The first one really is around what kind of product. What are my needs? Am I looking at a Category 6 solution? Am I looking at a Category 6A solution? Really the importance of making that kind of a decision is crucial. And if you look at kind of the differences between a Category 6 and Category 6A, I guess fundamentally, Category 6 can easily support, 1 gigabit per second network speeds, with a maximum bandwidth of about 250 megahertz at 100 meters. Now, it can also support, higher data rates of 10 gigabits per second. However, that's going to be at a shorter distance, generally in a 37 to 55 meter range. 6A, on the other hand, is capable of supporting data transfer rates of up to 10 gigabits per second at a maximum bandwidth of about 500 megahertz and a distance, of 100 meters. 6A, from a manufacturing standpoint, has a few additional and tighter twists and some additional insulation that helps reduce crosstalk as well. One of the big buzzwords in the industry right now is PoE. I think we talked about this on a couple of slides here already, but PoE or Power over Ethernet, really has emerged as a preferred technology for delivering remote power to connected devices. As more and more network devices, such as again, we've mentioned IP security cameras, Wi-Fi access points, in-building wireless, building management systems, LED lighting, as more of these devices are being implemented, we're looking at remote powering options, right, and the opportunity to save infrastructure costs by powering them over the existing structured cabling that's already in place in the building. So we're seeing this definitely evolve and grow really right before our eyes. One of the other things that you want to look at would be kind of future proofing, right? Making sure that whatever you implement today is going to be useful 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road from now, right? So when you look at future proofing, you really want to look at a fiber backbone, right? A fiber backbone you're going to be better off than a copper backbone because fiber obviously has the ability to carry more data than copper. Fiber, optic cables obviously frequently used to link switches between telecommunications closet, and in this kind of capacity, it acts as a data backbone between the rooms. Fiber is also commonly used for longer runs, supporting gigabit Ethernet. Again, it can't be overstated that making sure that the investment that you make today is one that's going to be able to support your needs not only today but obviously down the road as well. A couple things that I think you would want to take into consideration too when exploring your options and looking at various structured cabling solutions and providers is the warranty. It's a big investment, obviously, when you choose a structured cabling system and implement it in your facility. So warranty is really key. You really want to look at a solution that offers as an end-to-end tuned network solution that has at least a 25-year warranty that would really safeguard your solution, your system against manufacturing defects or even defects from delivery, installation on the site. So warranty again is a key component and driver that I think you would want to look at. And along that regard, when you look at the warranties, there's different warranties out there, but looking at a warranty that also has a product performance assurance component to it, not only protects the product and the investment, but it also future-proofs the system. So a product performance assurance warranty will state that whatever system that the cabling is designed to run on, whatever you implement down the road, that product, that solution will support that sort of bandwidth, right? So right now when you're looking at solutions, the bandwidth today on the cabling usually is a little higher than it is on the electronics. So what we're saying is make sure that when you buy your cabling solution, you buy it with a lot of throughput, a lot of bandwidth to be able to support future growth on the hardware side. And then again, one of the things that I think is often understated is making sure that when you pick a solution and it has the warranty, has all the things and attributes that you're looking for, making sure that the company that does the installation work is certified and trained and gone through all the requirements that the manufacturer sets forth. The products alone are obviously a huge portion of your network, but making sure that those products are installed correctly and that everything is fine-tuned and the people that are doing the installations have passed all the tests and training requirements that the manufacturer set forth. So again, I think looking at everything that we're talking about today, it's a link, and every part of that link has to work cohesively with the rest to make sure that you're getting exactly what you paid for and exactly what you expect out of your network. So with that, I'll pass it back over to Rick and Rich, and we can take the next slide.
That was awesome. Thank you. In fact, let's bring this all home, JP and Rick. So let's picture what it looks like in a classroom. Now, this is not a typical classroom. This is sort of an amalgamation of multiple classroom deployment types, but it's just to give you a sense, right? So how does all the technology fit in my classroom? Well, I'll start by saying, well, the APs could be deployed in a classroom. It's not always that you deploy one AP per classroom. In fact, that's probably not always the right idea, but it can be. And so, you put the AP in there to support what? Well, the learning devices, first and foremost, Chromebooks, laptops, tablets, maybe even phones in a high school if that's part of the, polling technology or something like that. But then there's other things, right? It's not just the learning devices, but things like VR, like a smart board, like I mentioned, displays for sharing information in a student-centric learning environment, printers, and so on. Rick, you want to talk about the switch?
Well, I think, you've got lots of devices in the room, and, first and foremost, the access points need to connect into a switch. And a lot of times those switches are in a wiring closet, and yet, then again, sometimes you have either enough devices or you need the proximity. It makes sense to have a classroom switch. So, you might need, small classroom switches that are silent, are fanless, that can go in there, designed so that they can be in a classroom without being disruptive. Basically the premise of what we're talking about today is as you move through those phases of digital learning, there are more and more devices. They are more and more dependent on that connectivity. So,
I think, and then all of these things need to get connected up, right, JP?
Yeah, I guess kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, I don't want to date myself, but back when I started out in this industry, it was your computer that was basically a computer network that was running over the cabling. And this diagram really is a perfect illustration of all of the devices that we're now requiring to run over that cabling infrastructure. And if you think of it like a highway, the more cars that you put on the highway, the more congested it gets, right? You need more lanes, you need more bandwidth. So all of these devices require bandwidth, and you want to make sure that you have enough bandwidth, not only again today, but a couple of years down the road, because the devices aren't going to get less, right? They're going to get more, and we're going to keep adding. So,
absolutely right. In fact, that's a great lead-in to where we're going, right? So that's just the classroom, but then at some point you got to connect up all the classrooms and then all the schools within a district, right? So the whole thing comes together within a district. So again, you could manage this with a network controller, maybe in a district office, or it could be, if you have it disarranged, like we do here in Santa Clara County, the County Office of Education could be hosting, and so the districts could be managed by the County Office of Education. You can choose how you want to do it, but the idea here is so many things are migrating online, like your learning management system, your LMS, or your student information system, your SIS. They're moving to the cloud. The curriculum itself with Khan Academy sort of kicking this whole thing off, but, you know, Brain Pop and IXL and others, the curriculum itself is going digital and online. Many of these apps are cloud-based. The assessments themselves are often delivered over a connection. They're not delivered locally. And so that connection from the internet to the office, to the school, and to the classroom, right? That's why we say reliable connections are critical to learning, because as you migrate to more digital learning, those connections become more and more important. Otherwise, you're going to interrupt the learning. And most schools would say, look, we have great network coverage, but we just don't think it's adequate for the burgeoning use of digital curriculum. And that's really what it's all about. We're not saying you don't have a network. Undoubtedly you do, but is it sufficient for what you want to do is the question. And let's do a little more practical example. And I like this one because it really makes you think a little bit. What are the implications on instruction and your network, right? So assume about 1,000 hours of instruction time a year. This is from the U.S. Center for Public Education. And assume 5,000 students in your district. Now, I know a lot of districts are probably a lot smaller than that. I think the average is roughly like 2,000 to 3,000, but let's make the numbers easy so the math is easy. We all like easy math. As I mentioned in the beginning, we're not at 50% yet. We're maybe, let's say, 10% instruction digitally today. Again, make the math easy. So 10% of that 1,000 hours is 100 hours times 5,000 students is 500,000 online instruction hours today. That's already a lot. But over the next few years, if we move to 50% instruction time, now you're talking 50% of 1,000 hours is 500 hours times the same number of students. Let's keep that constant. That's 2.5 million hours of online instruction time per year. That's a lot, right? So do you think your network uptime is going to be sufficient for that? Are you going to have enough bandwidth to support 2.5 million hours of online instruction time per year? I don't know that that's an easy answer, nor how much network do I need to support that, right? Which is really why we want to get to our checklist, which is coming shortly, I promise. But let's take a look at what network reliability looks like in this model, right, the day in the life. So if we start at 10% and we say, okay, there's a network glitch that happens in the afternoon, but my online course was in the morning, I'm fine. I wasn't impacted. Students were not impacted. Teacher wasn't impacted. But as we move to 50% online digital curriculum delivery, now there's a better chance in that coin flip that there's going to be some online course or some curriculum being delivered or a test being delivered that is impacted by some downtime during the day, right? And then if you go to 100%, well, of course, you can't tolerate anything, and you need a fault-tolerant system where you're not going to have any network issues during that time. Now, most schools will say, well, I don't know if I'll ever get to 100%, but, you know, we have some schools that we work with, like Summit Charter Schools, that claims to be 100% digital today. But a more practical model would be, let's say, standardized testing week. So if you're going to do Ohio testing or SBAC or PARC testing for a week, and you're rotating the kids through the library or through the multipurpose room or wherever you set up your computers, they're basically 100% online from morning till afternoon every day for that week. So for that week, you are 100% digital, and you cannot tolerate some downtime. So ultimately, I like to ask, would a 5-minute disruption really impact a 50-minute class? And I think if you've ever been in that position, if you've ever taught, or you've ever been in front of your boss and your peers trying to give a presentation and you can't connect to the network, or you can't connect even to the overhead projector, and you can feel their eyes kind of burrowing in the back of your head, you know that you only have a few minutes before you've lost the audience. And especially, for younger kids, they're not going to be patient to sit there, right? Once you've lost their attention, the teacher is just going to say, look, this isn't working. Shut down your computers, pull out your books, or pull out your papers, or let's go outside. And now they got to figure out how to make up that lesson time. And, that isn't going to happen more than 2 or 3 times before the teachers are going to say, this network's just not ready for digital learning yet, and they're going to push back on the curriculum. And that's not a position you want to be in.
Well, and it's one of the barriers to adopting technology in the classroom. You're right. As a teacher comes in, if it takes 5 minutes to get things up and going, and that happens all the time, then the kids are distracted and doing other things, and they're not, productive in the ability to teach in classroom. So,
in fact, we have a good case study.
Yeah, good segue to.
And I'm going to ask you, Rick, about this. So this is Wilton Public Schools, who are suffering unreliable networks that made the faculty wary of technology, exactly like we're talking about. But what did they do?
Well, they exactly that. And in fact, I found, not coming from of having, worked in schools, but my wife was a teacher, so I understand some of that stuff. But, they had an interesting problem, and it was exactly that they, in fact, brought somebody on board specifically focused on developing, using technology in the classroom. And the problem was, the first barrier was the teachers in learning how to use it and taking advantage of it. And if they had stumbling blocks, they didn't want to do it. The kids actually are probably easier to adapt to it, but they, they didn't have a network that they could rely on, and that issue about not being able to use it properly. So they actually had a director of technology who worked hand in hand with the IT director to look at what they could do. And they had, as I said, it was not very reliable. It wasn't, pervasive. They couldn't get good coverage every place. So, what they did was they mapped out what they wanted to do, where they wanted to go, right, and started a project where, they started, I think it was in the high school, and then working where they were down through the middle school and elementary schools, was to bring in new technologies, higher performance, and they did it across the board. So they brought in high-performance Wi-Fi. They also brought in, a new switching infrastructure with multi-gigabit technologies, and gave them a platform and gradually started implementing technology in various phases to be able to move through that curve. And they've actually built a network that I would say is pretty much to phase 4.
Yeah, they went right to multi-gig.
They went to
enabled exactly phase 4, right? And I think they're one of the first to do this collaborative video collaboration, cross-country, right? The one school's working with a school in Africa, which is available on the, we don't have time to get into it here, but the video is posted, and we'll give you a link at the end of the webinar. So I would encourage people to go watch that. Very cool. Very cool.
Right. So they've really, I think, I like to think, they really did it right. They did an interesting process to build their network to meet what they wanted.
Okay. Now, can everyone else do that? Yeah, but they're going to have to take a few steps here. So now let's get to the meat of it here and get into our checklist. So we've talked about the phases of digital learning and these transitions. And really these transitions are great checkpoints for you to say, look, are we providing the network and broadband scaling needed to underpin all the digital learning that needs to happen, while being mindful that as we go to digital, there are new challenges for student safety online as well as physical safety and wellness. And then third, it's great to have like we said, JP said it right? The network, the highway needs to be broad enough to support all the cars you want to put on it. But can you avoid the traffic jams? Can you provide reliable learning on that highway, right? And that basically means, can the teacher get through the lesson plan without interruption, right? Start the lesson on time, get through the lesson without interruption. The last thing they want to be is an extension of the IT help desk. They just want to focus on teaching and learning. So what does that checklist look like?
The checklist.
The checklist.
That's what you've been talking about.
The checklist, right? So thank you for staying with us this long, right? So this is basically, looks like our infographic, but we're just giving you some things to think about based on, the kinds of things you're trying to do, right? So, VR, video streaming, gamification, or moving ahead to video-based courseware or eSports, or are you trying to offer online classes to the community, even a global community, and going virtual? So things to consider about, some main tick boxes to look at. How are you going to manage all this? How are you going to connect wirelessly to enable student-based learning and beyond? What is your switching technology to undergird all that? And then the cabling technology to connect all that with enough reliable bandwidth that's going to make this work to the needs of your school district and within your budget. So let's just start at a high level, and I'll ask for everyone here to contribute here. So from a management perspective, for small schools or multi-school sites, we ask you to consider, do I need a wireless controller? Do I need a network controller that combines wired and wireless? Do I want to move to a cloud-based solution at this point and let someone else manage my infrastructure for me and do something very easy for me. Certainly for smaller schools, I think that makes a lot of sense. But we're even seeing mid-sized schools moving to this model as well as they realize that it can satisfy their basic needs. Cloud makes it a lot easier for them. But going forward, can you support things like IoT and security applications? So if you're moving to the point where maybe you're talking to your operations team or your security team and you're saying, hey, we need to be able to support connected entry solutions like door locks, or we need to support our, move our analog cameras or CCTV cameras to the IP network. How do we do that? Maybe we want to connect up lights and HVAC systems and other things. Vape detection is another one. We have a whole other webinar on that I will refer you to, but connecting vape sensors in bathrooms and locker rooms onto your switch network and tying it together to different systems. Those are things you can start considering in phase 4 based on a reliable multi-gig network with centralized management. And then finally, analytics. So as you're connecting more and more users, devices, things, IoT, et cetera, having analytics tell you what all is connected to your network, what's working, what's not working, what are the state of things, and presenting it in an easy format is a big driver for cloud analytics, and we'll definitely be covering that in a deeper dive in future webinars. And then single pane of glass. Can I bring together my cabling infrastructure, my wired infrastructure, my wireless, my IoT, in-building LTE? Maybe it's a panacea right now, but by phase 5, we hope to give you the tools where single pane of glass is more practical. Okay, and we've talked about Wi-Fi 5 and 6. Let me pass it on and see, guys, what do you think about progressing phase to phase and checking on switching or cabling technology?
Well, a lot of what you need as you go down this stack is really building, on those things to give you the infrastructure that supports there. So when you move from Wi-Fi 5 to Wi-Fi 6, you clearly need to start going to multi-gigabit technologies. You need, we're seeing a trend of increasing use of power, not certainly on the access points. If you're driving more radios, you're driving more devices, you need more power. We're also seeing a lot of use of other powered devices like, pan-tilt zoom cameras, LED lighting built on the infrastructure. And then, of course, if you have multi-gigabit connections, your backbone better be increasing in performance because you got, a dozen.
Is going to move, right?
Yeah, you're pushing more, into your switch. You got to have a bigger uplink out of your switch and support all that. I think that, as we mentioned up early about scale, it's really important to think about, what you're going to need. We talked about the life of some of this infrastructure. If you want a switch that lasts 7 to 10 years, which our customers are looking at, if you're moving to phase 4, you're looking at where you're going, but you need to be thinking about building an infrastructure that's going to support you when you get to phase 5, because you're not going to have to, replace hardware. You may want to augment it, but you're not going to want to replace things when you get to the next section. So you need to start thinking about having the infrastructure that's going to allow you to build and grow, not just today, but where you're going to be within the lifetime of that infrastructure.
All right, and how about on the cabling side here? JP, any thoughts on this checklist?
Yeah, I guess I would just kind of let you reiterate, and I know we've stressed upon this a few times, but just the importance of looking ahead. And, the structured cabling component really is becoming the fourth utility. And I think, if we had the ability and to go back in time and look, 5 years ago at what our network demands were at that point, to where they are today, I think we would be amazed, right? We're talking about vape sensing and PoE and powered lighting and all of these sort of things that we're now putting on the network that we didn't have 5 years ago. So if you just take that snapshot in time and then you try to forecast ahead 5 years and just imagine the things that we're going to be adding then. So it's critical to, when you're looking at that cabling piece, especially not to just look at the needs today. What are my needs going to be in 5 years, and trying to forecast ahead so that you've built yourself enough wiggle room in that network to handle all of the demand that is going to be required.
Yeah, and we indicated in here, maybe a little tongue-in-cheek, but there's so many schools that have Cat 5e still, right? And so we'd say, look, it was fine for what it was for, but when I hear this question, do I really need to plan to upgrade my cabling? The answer is going to be yes. At some point, you really do need to, and maybe for phase 3, it's just Cat 6. But if you're really looking ahead, I would say if you're saying multi-gig because you want to start thinking about video courseware, video collaboration, eSports, integrating IoT with your traditional IP network, then you need multi-gig with Wi-Fi 6, and as soon as you need multi-gig with Wi-Fi 6, you need multi-gig switching, and if you're going to do multi-gig switching, you're looking at Cat 6A. Yep. So it seems to me that one of the takeaways from this checklist is Wi-Fi 6 really needs multi-gig switching to make it sing, and if you're going to go multi-gig, you need Cat 6A for the reliable connectivity. So it's sort of as a set, but you may not have the budget to do all three at the same time. But again, the checklist isn't really about that as much as saying these are what we're going to need. We need to plan ahead, and then of course you'll have to decide what you're going to put in first, second, and third, or what you can do together. All right, outstanding. Again, if there's any questions, please put that into your Q&A window. I'm happy to answer it or dig deeper into it. I realize we're getting close to the top of the hour here. I just want to kind of pull this together into an example, not to harp on eSports, but it is a frothy topic. The picture here is really just to give you an idea. Some people think eSports and they just think a couple of kids sitting in a library setting or in their basement, their mom's room, the mom's basement. But in a school setting, it could be something much more akin to a real sports arena atmosphere. And it doesn't mean to be a dedicated space. And believe it or not, they are building large public venues just for eSports today. You've got basketball arenas, you've got hockey arenas, and now you're getting eSports arenas. Yeah. This is a thing, and it's getting bigger and bigger. But within a school setting, you have a certain amount of budget and space to work with and resources to work with. Here's an example where a school said, look, let's just set up some tables, run some cable, put in some switches, some computers, put up some screens so people can see what's going on, and then hopefully the kids watching can connect, and they're probably sharing on the school social media, rooting for their teams and publishing the scores, right?
You got a pop-up arena in the gym, exactly what we're pictured here.
Right.
And you got a wheel in. These things are put a big load on the network, and you need to,
Then there's some ramifications here, like can I provide locally, maybe I don't have multi-gig everywhere, but I just need it in this venue,
for a few days.
For a few days, right? So here we mentioned a specific product, the 7150C10ZP. It's sort of a mini multi-gig switch that you could put in a very specific location to support that use case, right? Rather than deploying pervasively district-wide where you may think going multi-gig is super expensive and it's intimidating. This is something you could sample it, right?
Yeah.
So that's cool. And then do you want to have guest Wi-Fi in the stadium? So even if you didn't have Wi-Fi for everybody there, maybe for this situation, you pop up a few APs, connect it to your local switches, and allow people to connect. Hopefully not connected to the district network.
Right. Guest network so they don't have access to everything. So, simple controls to get that in place.
So that's what we mean by this. And then we say filtering and firewalls, because normally you don't want the kids playing games during school, but perhaps the ones who are in the eSports group are in your firewall settings or in other ways that you're managing it, and they're allowed to connect to it, but maybe only in the gym or only after 3 p.m. or something. So you can set those kinds of permissions, so that's part of it. Right? All right. Moving on. So what do we offer that can help you do all these things that we've talked about? There's a number of different products. I'm not going to go into detail here. You guys can see for yourselves, but obviously we have the Wi-Fi infrastructure. We have the switching. We actually have an IoT suite to connect up your IoT devices. We will get into that in a separate webinar in detail. We have cloud-managed infrastructure, Wi-Fi Today, which is coming shortly. So we'll be able to do cloud-managed infrastructure for you. We have the controller software, which is called Smart Zone, to connect up and manage and troubleshoot all of those things. We have cloud-powered software for onboarding your devices quickly and easily, like Chromebooks, onto the network, and do it in a way where you don't have to memorize passwords anymore. And even do something called ePSK to connect up all your things where you don't have necessarily passwords per se, but securely connect your things to the network. And then, of course, as part of CommScope now, CommScope structured cabling to connect within the site, site to site, right? So campus connectivity, both copper and fiber solutions available. So all the above are available to you to help set the stage for digital learning transition. If you want to learn more beyond this webinar, right? If you want to try cloud for yourself, get an AP set and have somebody set it up for you and see how easy it is, there's a link here you can follow to go sign up for that. It's free. If you want to see this infographic that we've been talking about and get a nice big downloadable copy that you can print off or share, it's available on our K-12 page, as well as our Wilton public school case study. Both the PDF and the videos are available on our primary ed page. And then our Campus Networks page on the CommScope site under Solutions Campus Networks gives you all the information you need on structured cabling solutions. And with that, I'm going to say thank you and open it up to see if there's any questions. I realize we're at the top of the hour. We may not have a chance to answer them all, but we'll do our best to stay online or answer via email. Amy, did you see any come in while we were talking?
Yes, we've got a question coming in from somebody saying, I attempted Phase 4 wireless cabling infrastructure years ago and it's been buggy. I've fought it for years and can't consider moving forward as nobody is satisfied with what we currently have. Who can help me with this whole wad? I'm frustrated.
Okay.
I've heard that story before.
So we're happy to work with you. Lynn, if I can work off your details that you registered with and get back to you and reach out to you. I would say that a lot of times, in my experience, I'm not saying it's your case, but a lot of times what I see is there's a certain expectation of where we are when things are purchased, and what happens is we start evolving and moving to the next phase, and then what you have is insufficient for where you get to. And it could be any one of these things, right? So whether, you know, maybe you had the structured cabling infrastructure, but the Wi-Fi is insufficient, or the Wi-Fi was designed to be placed to support teacher-centric learning, but then as you move to phase 3 and 4, the design isn't keeping up with how much is being placed on it. I don't know. I'm just telling you, just anecdotally, those are the kinds of things we see. And Rick has done numerous webinars discussing how the bottleneck is now moving from Wi-Fi connectivity to the switch behind the Wi-Fi. So maybe you put in really good high-speed Wi-Fi access points, but they're still connecting to older technology switches, and they become the bottleneck. So we'd have to look at your particular situation, and happy to learn more offline because we're at the top of the hour.
Well, and pair you up with one of our channel partners who, you know, has experience in your area and knowledge of our products to help you design a solution that makes sense. Because, you know, we have good product, you know, there are good products out there, we have good products, but, you know, it's a matter of putting together what you need. We have lots of customers very happy with their networks who are, like Wilton Public Schools, I think is a great example of what they've been able to accomplish and some of the things they're doing in their school district. It is certainly possible to put that together.
Okay. So Lynn, we'll be in touch, and we'll connect you to your local team from RUCKUS as well as your preferred partner in that area so we can look at it in detail for you, okay?
Thank you all for your time and your attendance today. We really appreciate it. There will be a follow-up email that if you need anything, please do not hesitate to reach out. And at this, we'll close the recording and close the webinar. Thank you very, very much.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great day.